James is having stuffed pepper and asparagus with Asian sauce and some of this salad and yogurt. And we're going to talk about being human and some of the other things here. But I'm going to read a poem first that was inspired by listening to being human. I have a lot that were, and I'll get through them eventually. It's taking us a while to get through the stack anyway. The Curse of Agriculture, which I wrote May 2nd, 2024. Some academics criticize agrarian societies. They look at bones and realize that health decreased in groups like these. In groups like these, men seem to shrink and girls matured far later too. But if malnourished, you would think they'd also hunt, as nomads do. Did farmers suffer more from drought and famine than the tribal men? The farmers couldn't move about since they would lose their land right then. An academic said that we, in civilized societies, would benefit if we were free to dine from wildlands as we please, protected by our new vaccines. The wildlands can't feed everyone. Should only men who have the means or might get vaccinations done and gain abundance from the land? Baboon groups in East Africa were studied. Now men understand how tourist fare affected the baboons who ate the tourist waste compared to those who ate wild fare. Baboon groups with a Western taste caught some diseases humans share, a cow tuberculosis and some insulin resistance too. They had more young though, understand, more young survived, as our young do, and when a drought moved through their land, baboons in wildlands suffered more. Our Western diet isn't grand. We got more than we bargained for. Diseases leading to vaccine development and medicine, food storage for when times are lean, more trading than there'd ever been. Rewards for those who planned ahead, more innovations, more men thrived, and more were passive men instead of just the meanest who survived, unlike in wild societies. We've played the ultimatum game through trade, and any person sees the meanest didn't fare the same. Our people won because they're fair. They're folks with whom folks seek for trade. We grew enough with food to spare, then sold spare food and things we made. Though agriculture's cost us some, it's been a blessing for mankind. That academic wasn't dumb. If we spoke freely, then I'd find he knows that universities, just like the one that pays his wage, developed in societies that farmed. We lead the modern age because we traded what we grew. Baboons who share our tourist food survive the drought as tourists do, on farm-grown food. The attitude some Western academics share that agriculture's been our curse is quite misleading. They're aware their lives as wild men would be worse than as elitist Western snobs. They think that they're superior because they hold elitist jobs as Brahmin. Brahmin just want more. They want the food the wild men eat. Have Brahmins' mental powers gained them right to pick and choose? To beat the wild men since they've not obtained the education farmers grew for their descendants years before? Should Brahmin beat their farmers too? They know that farms feed many more of us than wildlands ever could. These Brahmin want most men to die, though academics' lives are good. It's they who curse us with their life. So
there's a lot of things to unpack, and can we talk about it now?
Yeah, you can talk about my poem. Go ahead, you talk about it.
You know, this thing about bones being better and stuff like that, I would like to think it was kind of age adjusted. I suspect definitely in so-called Western societies, people live longer. I don't know whether...
You can take your mask off now. Okay. I'll put mine on.
I don't know whether people live longer, under peasant societies and stuff like that. People, there would have been something like a population explosion, nothing like that's been happening in the last century or so, but you see, Pauline mentions the drought. So what happens is if someone is a hunter-gatherer and there's a drought. Uh-oh.
Well, they're going to have to move. And they did. But they're moving where other people are too. So what's going to happen? There's going to be wars.
That's exactly right. So they'll die young, one way or another. Will it show if they die in a drought? Will it show up in their bones? Maybe if you look really carefully. But that would be a short-term thing. It's not like a long-term thing. Now, there is a problem. It's not a problem so much anymore in societies that trade. There's a problem with deficiencies in soil. Did they talk about that? When people are agricultural, they tend to be sedentary, and they're stuck with a certain type of soil. Every soil is going to have certain deficiencies. They didn't talk about it, did they?
No.
No. Whereas a hunter-gatherer is going to be going across many different types of soils and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
A nomad, maybe even more. This sounds as though the study or studies were a little bit, shall we say, not even sophomoric, but freshman-like. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that occurred to me right away. I didn't even see the show, but you get certain type of societies, like the Viking societies. They've found amazing treasures in kingly type of burials, royal type of burials. And the thing that shocked them more than the richness was how young these kings were when they died. They were slaughtering each other. They just weren't slaughtering their neighbors, their sedentary neighbors. They were slaughtering each other. It was gang warfare. Welcome to the real world of non-agricultural peoples or hunting, gathering. Like Pauline mentions it. There's a drought, you move elsewhere. But hey, people are elsewhere. There's no empty territories in the world. That's the amazing thing. When they talk about pastoral nomads. Oh, they were peaceful. When someone impinged on their territory, they'd retreat to where? Someone else's territory. Come on. We're dealing with the real world here, including the real world of the past. And just because it's the past doesn't mean you can make it up whole cloth and, really, whole hog. So cut out all this nonsense about, narratives. Everything is a narrative. But there's some narratives that actually try to get to something like the truth. And then there are the narratives dreamed up by the Trumpists. And the narratives dreamed up, understand, Trump knows when he's lying pretty well. He's pretty dumb. Sometimes I suspect he doesn't know. But he's a businessman. And he's used to lying to get his way, persuade people to do things, to give money, whatever. But people hanging out in the left wing, just hanging on by the scruffs of their necks or by the seat of their worn out seat of their pants, they're making up lies and they believe them, kind of, sort of. They're going around saying everything's relative and everything's a narrative. And then when you question that narrative, oh man, wow, that person's really wrong somehow or another. It's hard to find people who believe in their narratives as hard as lefties nowadays. They're constantly going around, that's a narrative, and then they're in the middle of it, making narratives of everything else. People are actually, in some cases, trying to get to something like the truth. It's an illusion to think, or a delusion to think that you can arrive at the ultimate truth. But you can kind of get a little bit closer and a little bit closer. You can actually deal with cancer a little bit closer. If I'd got my bone marrow cancer 20 well, let me think, 10, 15 years earlier, I would have been a dead duck in a year and a half. And it's been 12 years. Plus, coming up 13. I would have been a dead duck. Because they came up with a treatment. Oh, yeah, you don't deserve to live. Yeah, maybe not. But at least we have a choice. Because someone actually discovered something.
Yeah, but the point is somebody discovered something because of our agriculture and trading background. You know, that's what led to all that. So you can say, oh, we'd be better off if we were able to live off the land and migrate and whatever, and eat just wild food, but have our vaccines. But, well, you can't have both. You can't have both.
You can't.
What are you going to kick off the people who have been living off the land so that you can live off their land while you have the vaccines?
You need a surplus to support people who do research. Surpluses aren't produced. Like, I'm a hunter nomad and I carry my surplus around on my back. You can't do that because that burns up calories. You got calories on your back and you're burning it up. You need a surplus to support. No, there's lots of folks, sadly, in universities that are just bumps on the lawn. And some are worse. They're like something that's feeding off the lawn. They're parasites. But some people, particularly in the sciences, get things, or more like the technological sciences, actually get things done. You know, witness the vaccine for a certain pestilence that hit the world maybe about 4 years ago or something like that. You know, if it hadn't been for those vaccines, oh my gosh, tens of millions would have died. It might still get to tens of millions if we don't smarten up about this certain pestilence. I hesitate to say what it is because I don't want to get censored, but there we go. Anyway, let's move on.
So I'm going to talk about hacking your mind a little bit again. And this time I'm going to talk about the major theme throughout hacking your mind. And it was about race and racism. And it kept coming up again and again. So there's a lot of examples when you're watching it. The first thing they're talking about is the human brain and how there's some things that your brain does that are just, it's automatic. You do it without thinking. I mean, your heart has to keep beating, you have to keep breathing. You can't be thinking about that. It has to happen. So your body takes care of a lot of things for you without you thinking about it. And then there's things that you've learned. Like at the beginning, it was difficult for you to learn how to walk, but you picked it up and you don't think about that anymore. It's automatic too now. You just
I can't even remember that stage, but I can remember trying to tie up my shoelaces.
Yeah.
That would have been when I was in 4.
Yeah.
I had trouble, big trouble. So it goes. I think most people do, but some people may not.
So anyway, there's things that they used to, like, there's things that were always automatic. You didn't have to think about them ever. And then there's things that you picked up and now they're automatic, but they weren't originally. But you did them a whole bunch of times and they're automatic now. So,
hopefully, you don't want to think about tying up your shoelaces. Do you ever thought about it? You know, you say,
no.
What am I doing?
It was very hard.
It's confusing.
And it would be confusing if you actually thought about it. It's better that it's just automatic. So, anyway, there's those sort of things. So they were talking about that, and then they were talking about how basically you have a slow brain, and it's as a species, you know, we're more developed this way because we can work things out with a slow brain, but not everything is.
Does the prefrontal lobe kind of slow things down, or lobes? Do they kind of slow things down?
I don't know.
They say people who've got.
I mean, they did talk about. I think it was in this. They mentioned it was one of the things they mentioned that your brain doesn't fully develop until 25, around there.
Yeah.
So that's something to really think about. But anyway, so
The trouble is, the people who should be thinking about it are under 25.
yeah.
So what can you do?
Yes.
Hey man, I'm going to just do what I feel like.
So I talked about the brain that way and development, and they talked about how other animal species. They were talking about a monkey right away. That right away near the beginning, they're talking about a monkey species and how monkeys, it's basically all automatic. They're not thinking about. It's not slow brain sort of thing. They have to react right now. So it's all fast response sort of thing. And then they were showing a tribe of nomads in Africa, and they were following a hunter around, and they were very amazed by how automatic his thinking was. It was very fast thinking. It was not, he didn't have to, like, he had shot some sort of critter that, I guess it looked kind of like a ground squirrel to me, because I'm trying to think, this is what is around here, right? And so it's not very big, but apparently it's related to an elephant, but it's not anything like an elephant from what
It's a little rodent
it's a little
type
thing, yeah.
I think they are, what are they called, conies or something like that?
Oh, so you remember them?
No. I've just read about them.
Oh.
There are ones that are related to elephants that, I don't know if they're exactly conies, but one of the few places where they lived was like around Jerusalem or something like that.
Oh. So anyway, he's talking about that, how the guy, he lined up and he managed to see this little critter that, little critters tend to move pretty quickly, and he managed to shoot him right in the eye, right? It was just instant. He didn't have to think about anything, and so I'm watching this
How
going.
close was he?
Not very close. Like, he was
Because you'd have to
impressive as a
take into
hunter.
account the drive it, right?
Yeah, well, he did it, and apparently he's a really good hunter. But you're left watching this and going, okay, are you comparing African nomadic people to monkeys in the way that they're thinking? Really, because they're talking about the automatic,
This wasn't a
instinct.
little, sorry. This wasn't a little Khoisan or Bushman guy, was it?
No, he didn't seem small.
Okay, was it more jungle territory?
I don't know, but you can watch this.
Okay. Anyway.
It's worth watching. So anyway, and then there's they show little children, and when they're given they spin the wheel to see whether they're an orange shirt or a green shirt person, and then they put on the orange shirt or the green shirt, whichever. It's just whatever they happen to spin. It's not their preference, it's just
A sign.
it's so if a little girl liked orange more and she ended up with a green shirt, it wouldn't matter, right? So then they had pictures where the children were asked, okay, well, who do you like more, and and it went further than that. It was analyzing what happened in the pictures. They can't know. It's just a picture of a couple people. They can't know what happened just before or whatever. But the children always picked the people who wore the same color of shirt as them. Those kids, it was just cartoon kids, right? As being good and like them, and they would share their gum with me, and they would do whatever. And the other color of shirts, he pushed him off the swing. He pushed or whatever, right? Like the other colors are bad guys. So they're saying, and when the kids were asked, well, sometimes they were asked, well, why did you pick that person? Oh, well, because they're like me. They're the same color of shirts. They're like me.
Okay.
And but
How old were the kids?
maybe 6.
Was there a difference between boys and girls? About the same?
They all picked their color of shirts, and
Okay.
they
How many kids were they studying?
I don't know.
I wish they'd give a few details on that. Because
Yeah, I know.
boys would be trained by that time. I mean, it's around age 5. I focused on Bobby Hull sports, team uniforms. That's one possible kind of counter-argument to that sort of thing. It might not be that natural, but it sounds suspicious, right?
Yeah, so anyway, they're saying that basically, and with the test, there was a test that you could do online. I can't remember what it's called, but I mentioned it the last time I was talking about this. So it turns out that white people favor, it might not have just been white people, but anyway, tend to not like people with dark skin as much or something like that. And I guess they tried to make this test online so that when you answer the questions, you're actually fooled so that you tell the truth. So that even if you believe that you actually like people with dark skin more, this test would show that however you answered that you actually didn't or whatever. Because the guy, he thought the host, Jacob Ward, he thought he actually liked old people more than young people. He didn't think he liked young people. And it turned out that he actually favored young people to old. And he was surprised about that. And I'm going to take the test too. And what I'm more interested in when I take these tests online is looking at, okay, well, if I answered this way, what would my, how do the answers come up with different results, right? I mean, it's interesting enough to find out, oh, this is what I think, but it's more interesting to think, how did you think this is how I thought, right? By giving this test. So, I'll see.
I think to a certain, this was on adults.
Yes.
I think to a certain extent, maybe a large extent, we're shaped by what we see on TV and movies, stuff like that.
Maybe.
So we're used to thinking of when I thought it was good-looking people as being nicer. It's just that way. And so people who are old just generally aren't considered as good-looking. And that's part of it. Right?
Yeah, that might be.
It's
it might be an attractive thing. It might just be fertile versus not or something though too. Like, because apparently strippers make more money in tips when they're ovulating than when they're not, and all this sort of stuff. So,
well,
but anyway,
according to one study, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about these studies.
Yeah,
a lot of the time, I look at them and I think, okay, well, was this really done? Should the parameters have been changed or whatever? But anyway,
it'd be interesting to find a particular question. Okay, how many studies stack up on one side, how many on the other?
Yeah.
And then it'd be like me, if I were really interested in the question, to actually look at what you say. What are the parameters here? What are the parameters here? Because most of these things could be settled.
Yeah.
Relatively firmly. But there are people who line up, and many of the parameters on both sides are going to be wrong because people are lining up because of political.
But there was something that I
beliefs.
found interesting. There was a test on people being stopped by the police, and if the people with dark skin were stopped by the police, a lot of the time, like the police go through a bunch of questions. Can I see your license and registration? Can I da 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 da? And if people had dark skin, then the question sometimes the police didn't even tell them why they were stopped. Sometimes the people with dark skin tended to get put your hands on the steering wheel. Put your hands, where I can see them on the steering wheel. So stuff like that, right? And so I guess since there's a lot of body cam footage, they were able to go through this stuff, and they found out that the police are actually not treating dark-skinned people the same as they treat light-skinned people. And so they're trying to rectify that problem.
Okay.
So, but I still want to talk about it.
Okay.
So,
I just want to, before we move on, I want to make a comment.
Okay. So, it turned out that even double-blind, if they went through the how the police were addressing the person who was stopped, just by their questions and answers and whatever, they could figure out whether it was a light-skinned person or a dark-skinned person, who that police officer was addressing. And at the same time, so they're saying, you know, the dark-skinned people, they're terrified of being pulled over because they realize this is going to happen to them. But at the same time, anybody who's watching this, I mean, I was shocked to hear about how easily they were able to see that, yes, police are treating people with dark skin differently. That's not good. But at the same time, when you're watching this, you think, okay, well, how were the police being treated by dark-skinned people as opposed to light-skinned people?
That is
and did that actually, because I mean, the police are having to deal with many people every day, and that's their lives. Their livelihood is pulling people over and whatever, and having to deal with this stuff.
Well,
and is
you
that
said
going
lives,
to shape
that could be livelihood and survival, but it's what the real concern is lives. But go on.
So is that shaping how they treat people, right? And that's something to look at too. You can't just look at the one thing and say, oh, this is how. You have to look at the other side and find out if there's a reason for that way.
This sounds like a very flawed study. So the distinction was between color and non-color?
I think so, yeah. I don't think it was just black and white.
Were they treating Chinese people that way?
Well,
you know, I can pretty well guarantee you they were treating Chinese people with even more respect than white people. Why? Because Chinese people, on average, really behave themselves. Oriental people, generally,
and
really behave
China
themselves.
So they have, on this later on, they're talking about China, and how I guess the government has used some sort of game technology things to try to encourage the youth in their population to behave accordingly. They want good citizens, and according to the Chinese government, that's uniformity. They want people who are the same. They answer the same, they behave the same, whatever. They fall in line. So that was frightening to watch, because you're watching this and going, okay, well, if they get points, the youth, this is voluntary, they sign up for this or not, right? But if they sign up for this, then they want to, it's kind of fun, they get some points for good behavior, like doing things that the government thinks is awesome, and then they'll get points deducted if they do things the government thinks is not so good, you know. So then they also know all of their friends' scores. Everyone of their friends that has signed up, they know what they get to, and if your friend has a bad score, that affects your score. So if you want to have a higher